He was just a mechanic. Silent, ordinary, invisible. Until one snowy night, he saved a life. That woman wasn't a victim, she was a target. And Lucas was no longer just a witness. He was right in the middle of a war. It begins for those with no real escape. Because sometimes, one night, changes a fate forever. Don't miss these real-life inspired, deep and gripping stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. The moonlight spilled over the cracked pavement like a tattered curtain. The streetlights cast a faint beam through the dusty windows, and Lucas's shadow looked thin and weary as it stretched across the walls. The wind that blew through the night sent a plastic bag tumbling, knocking against the trash can at the corner. The metallic sound of it hitting the can echoed down the empty street, almost like an explosion. Lucas didn't lift his head. His gaze was lost in the hood that fell over his shoulder. His steps were rhythmic, but reluctant. The day was over for him. Maybe this quiet walk was his strange victory at leaving another day behind. No one was waiting for him. The place he called home was just a rusty iron bed in a tired shack and an old stove that barely worked. That day, he had worked 2 jobs. The morning had passed under the endless orders of the foreman at the repair shop. In the afternoon, he had worked at the docks, and now he couldn't even remember where he had left the wheelbarrow. His fingertips still ached, but neither the weight of the canned soup he'd bought nor the smell of soot clinging to his coat bothered him. It was as if all that fatigue paled in comparison to the emptiness inside his heart. For Lucas, loneliness wasn't a punishment, it had become a choice. He had learned long ago that what people promised and what they actually gave were never the same. Trust had cost him dearly. That's why now, he never charged his phone, nor did he check his mailbox. The simpler life was, the fewer disappointments it held. He passed by a bench. For a moment, he thought about sitting down. But then, he changed his mind. Sitting meant thinking. And tonight, he didn't want to think. The corner store was closed. On the window, under the dim light, a note scrawled in yellowed paper read, "We'll be back tomorrow." Lucas glanced at the window briefly and then continued on his way. Nothing ever changed. The same silence, the same shadows, the same undefined tiredness. But that night, there was something different. Though he didn't know what yet, there was a strangeness in the air, hidden in the darkness just a little ahead. Lucas hadn't noticed, but his steps had quickened. His body had sensed it before his mind did. It was as if something was waiting for him ahead. Not an answer, but maybe a voice he hadn't heard in a long time. When he reached the end of the street, the wind changed direction. A trash can tipped over. Lucas flinched involuntarily. He turned his head slightly. Out of the corner of his eye, he looked into the deep darkness of a bush. And then, he paused for a moment. His ears searched for a sound, but there was nothing, just his own breath. But his instincts were whispering something else to him. Tonight wasn't going to be ordinary. Lucas took one step, then another. When he reached the bushes, the only thing cutting through the night was the moonlight. The streetlights didn't reach here. The wind blew gently, and the bare branches of the trees rubbed together, creating a soft, rustling sound. And on the ground, there was a blanket of pure white. Snow. A fine but persistent snow, falling silently, as if it were covering everything, even the past. But beneath the snow, something was still whispering. A crash mark. A vehicle lay on its side by the road. The front end was bent, and the bumper was almost touching the ground. One headlight still flickered faintly, while the other was completely covered in snow. The engine was silent, but there was still a faint wisp of smoke coming from the exhaust. The accident was fresh. Very fresh. Lucas froze for a moment. Then, slowly, he approached. He looked inside through the side window. And then, he quickly looked away. There was a woman inside. Her face was pressed against the glass. A lock of yellow hair fell onto her forehead and stuck to the foggy window. Her eyes were closed, but her chest rose and fell very slightly. She wasn't conscious, but she was still alive. Snow was seeping through the upper windows, falling onto the collar of her coat. For a few seconds, Lucas didn't do anything. He just stared. It was as if he had become a stranger to his own body. His feet were frozen to the ground, his mind caught in the chains of the past. The old night came back to him. Another car, another snowstorm, and a life he couldn't save. This time, he didn't want to be late. He immediately tried the back door. It was frozen. As the snow deepened, the metal lock wouldn't budge. He pressed his hands against it. He pushed with his elbow and shoulder. The cold seeped into his skin, but he didn't give up. A crunching sound broke the silence, followed by a click. The door opened. He gently lifted the woman. Her body was cold, but she wasn't frozen yet. Lucas pulled her from the snow and cradled her in his arms. In that moment, he wasn't just carrying her physical weight, he was carrying something else. This wasn't just about saving someone. It was a moment of reckoning with his past. He quickened his pace. His shoes sank deeper into the snow, shaking him with every step, but he didn't turn back. There was only one place they could take shelter, the repair shop where he worked during the day. It was usually empty at this time of year. The stove still worked, and inside, it would be warmer than this street could ever be. As Lucas moved forward, cutting through the night, the snow kept falling. It was as if the sky itself was trying to cover everything up. But some things couldn't be covered. The woman's head rested against his shoulder. Snowflakes landed on her eyelashes, melting away as soon as they touched her skin. And for the first time in a long while, something else in Lucas's heart began to warm. A mix of fear and curiosity. Who was this woman? But he wouldn't ask just yet. Because tonight wasn't about questions, it was about steps. And those steps were crushing not just the snow, but fate itself. Lucas kicked the door open. The cold rushed in. The repair shop, and used for a long time, was almost as silent as a grave. Each step echoed on the concrete floor. He headed toward the old stove in the corner. There was still some coal left inside. With trembling hands, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a matchbox. On the third strike, the stove lit up. Lucas didn't immediately lay the woman down. She had hit her head. Maybe she had a broken neck. He couldn't tell. He spread out a blanket, turned a rubber stool to the side, and sat the woman on it. Snowmelt dripped from her shoulders onto the floor. Her wet hair clung to her face. Lucas gently pulled a few strands of hair away from her face with his fingertips. Her eyelashes fluttered. Maybe she was dreaming, or maybe she was right in the middle of a nightmare. Lucas took a rag and slowly cleaned the blood near her eyebrow. Every movement was done with a careful attention, as if, with the smallest touch, this woman might disappear. Time passed. Between the creaks of the stove, the snow outside kept falling. Occasionally, ice on the roof cracked, and melting snow trickled down the gutters. The repair shop slowly began to warm up, as if it were taking a breath. Lucas sat in the chair across from her. His knees were resting on his elbows, and his head was in his hands. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't take her to a hospital. He didn't have a car, nor the strength to get that far. And the outside was becoming more dangerous. The storm had started. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Time had mixed with the crackling of the stove. Lucas couldn't take his eyes off the woman. Who was she? What was she doing on that road at this hour? And why wasn't she saying anything? Then, suddenly, the woman turned her head slightly. Her lips trembled. The sound she made was almost inaudible, but Lucas heard it. No, stop. This. Lucas straightened up. He kneeled beside her. Her eyes were still closed, but her lips moved again. This time, she said a name. It was so clear it almost echoed. Leon. Lucas froze. He didn't know this name, but it felt oddly familiar, like it came from somewhere deep inside. There was fear, helplessness in the woman's tone. It was as if someone was chasing her, or had abandoned her. Suddenly, the woman began to tremble. Lucas took off his coat and draped it over her. He sat next to her. But now, the questions in his mind were only multiplying. Who was this woman? Why was she so scared? And who was Leon? Just then, his old phone in his pocket made a slight buzz. It had been hours since the screen went black, but it flickered for a moment. The battery was dead, but for a brief second, the screen lit up. There was only one message. Number unknown. Unknown call rejected. Lucas stared at the screen. Something tightened inside him. The night was just beginning. And this woman wasn't just a victim. She was running from something. Maybe from someone. The fire in the stove had begun to flicker out. The ashes had turned gray, and the warmth was starting to fade. Lucas sat silently beside the woman's bed. His eyes were half closed, but he was awake now. Her breathing had steadied. It was weak, but there was a rhythm to it, a resistance. Lucas knew she was alive, but he still didn't know what kind of life she was living. Then the woman's eyes slowly opened. Her pupils weren't used to the dark. She looked around slowly. "Where am I?" she whispered. Lucas leaned in closer. "You're safe," he said quietly. But another thought lingered in his mind. Were they really safe? The woman tried to sit up, and Lucas immediately supported her shoulder. For a moment, Their eyes met. Her eyes were tired but alert. The accident. I remember, she said. Lucas nodded. I found you on the road. There was no one else. My phone wasn't working. The woman didn't say anything. It was as if she was lost in some internal struggle. Then she wet her lips and spoke again. They'll find me. Lucas hesitated. Who? The woman turned her head. She didn't answer for a few seconds. Then, in a soft whisper, she said, they. Just that. Just bad people. The words hung in the air. Bad people. It was one of those phrases that said so much but explained nothing. Lucas didn't know what to say, but the expression on his face had changed. This wasn't some random accident. This woman was really running away, and now she was right in front of him. At that moment, a sound came from outside. It was distant, but clear. The sound of metal crunching in the snow. Then another sound. Lucas immediately turned off the light. He motioned silently to the woman to be quiet. She was already frozen, her body stiff with fear. Lucas moved toward the window, slowly peeking through the gap in the curtains. The snow was still falling, but someone was walking outside. They weren't alone. At least two people. They had flashlights. As their lights hit the ground, mud splashed, the snow was disturbed, and their footsteps became clearer. The woman had pulled her knees to her chest. Her eyes were wide, her breath quickening. Lucas returned to her side and whispered, Are they looking for you? The woman barely nodded. If they hear my name, they'll burn us down. After a brief moment of hesitation, Lucas moved toward the back of the repair shop. He dragged an old oil barrel to the side. A small cupboard door opened behind the wall. It looked like an old shelter. Get in here, he said. The woman hesitated. What if they see you? Lucas spoke briefly but firmly. I'm used to it. The woman locked eyes with him. They stared for a few seconds. Then, calmly, she stepped inside. Lucas closed the lid. The cupboard was now invisible. He walked toward the door. The light from outside was now shining directly on it. He took a deep breath. The door wasn't knocked, there was a direct, forceful knock. Open up, came a voice. Cold, angry. Lucas leaned against the door. No one's here, he shouted. We've closed this place. Silence. Then another voice. Are you Lucas? This time, the voice was softer, more threatening, because it was calmer. Lucas's throat went dry. No, he said. You're at the wrong place. He heard a click. The sound of metal. Could it have been a gun? His heart began to pound in his chest. The voice outside spoke again. Did you see a woman? Lucas paused. It's snowing, he said. I'm just tending to the stove. The men didn't say anything. Then, the sound of footsteps began to fade away. But Lucas kept his hand on the door handle. It didn't sound like they were leaving. Maybe. They were heading toward the back door. A muffled sound came from the cupboard where the woman was hiding. They haven't left. Lucas cursed under his breath. He waited without blinking. Outside, the cold was unbearable. But inside, a much more dangerous warmth was growing. And for the first time in his life, Lucas was on high alert for someone else. The footsteps outside finally faded away completely. The snow had silenced everything outside, wrapping it all in a blanket. But inside, a bead of sweat trickled down Lucas's forehead. Not from the cold. It was a moment of decision. He slowly opened the cupboard where the woman was hiding. She was staring at him. There was still fear in her eyes, but this time, she was looking not just at the men outside, but at Lucas too. She still didn't know if she could trust him. Lucas handed her a blanket, and she stepped out. They sat by the stove. For a while, no one spoke. The fire was the only thing that broke the silence. Finally, Lucas spoke. You have to tell me now, he said. There was no anger or doubt in his voice, just exhaustion. I don't know who they are, but they came to kill you. And you don't look like some random person. The woman squinted at him. Her lips were dry, her voice hoarse, but when the words came out, they felt like shards of glass falling. My name is Elena. Lucas nodded. Last name. She remained silent. Then, her head dropped. If I tell you, it's over. Lucas had been expecting this, but still, something stirred inside him. It's already started, he said quietly. I don't think it's over. The woman took a deep breath. She placed her hands on her knees, interlacing her fingers. Elena Fry, she said. Then she added, I guess it's a miracle you haven't heard that name. Lucas didn't respond right away. Then, furrowing his brow and narrowing his eyes, he looked at her. The name, it was unfamiliar, but yes, he had heard it before. Then it came to him. Newspaper clippings, online articles, A young CEO who had risen fast in the financial world, only to suddenly disappear. Fry Corporation. Missing money. Scandals. Photos sent to the press. Private jets, meetings. And then suddenly, nothing. Are you? Lucas asked, holding his breath. Elena lowered her head. My name was whispered at the tables where empires were built and destroyed, she said with a bitter smile. But no one ever asked me, what do I want? For the first time, Lucas saw a break in her eyes. This break wasn't from the prestigious image of a CEO. It was something human. It was a wounded, fleeing, exhausted soul. And at that moment, Lucas was surprised at himself. He had begun to trust her. So why do they want to kill you? He asked. Elena took a deep breath. Because those inside the system. They fear the one person who could bring it down. As Lucas tried to process that, Elena added, I have a file. It contains documents of billions of dollars in illegal transfers, offshore accounts, money laundering. And I've decided to expose it. Lucas stood up. His hands behind his back, he walked away from the stove. None of this belonged to his world. He had just gone for a walk that night. He had only wanted to heat up some soup, have a quiet night. But now, he was in the same room with a witness whose life was in danger. A snowstorm outside, a bullet storm inside. So what do we do now? Lucas asked. Elena looked up. This was the only place I could take shelter. But it's not safe anymore. Lucas shook his head. What about the file? Elena paused for a moment. Then, she pulled a small USB drive from her jacket pocket. It's here. As Lucas looked at the file, the sound of an approaching engine reached them from outside. It was getting closer. And at that moment, Lucas unknowingly answered, I said it was just one night. But now, this story is mine too. As the sound of the engine got closer, the warmth from the stove seemed to be replaced by a chilling silence. Lucas turned towards the window, but this time, he didn't peek through the curtains. His eyes were fixed, his face still. Elena stood up from her chair. She tried to take a deep breath through her broken ribs. It was now a choice between hiding or surviving. We can escape, Lucas said, but his voice lacked conviction, almost as if he didn't believe it himself. Where to? Elena asked, her eyes tired but resolute. There's no escape. We can only move forward now. Lucas slowly turned the key in the door. This time, not out of fear, but acceptance. He slipped something into his inside pocket, the USB. Elena locked eyes with him. Don't do this for me, she said. This file will burn someone else, not you. Lucas shook his head. I could have left you there that night, but I didn't. And now, this isn't just your fight. The sounds outside had become clearer. The car door opened. The footsteps, crunching through the snow, moved in rhythm. Then, a voice echoed, Elena Fry. We know you're in there. Give us what you took and go on your way. Silence. Then Lucas opened the door. He stepped out alone. With his hands raised, he moved forward. It's just me here. There's no woman, he said. The lights shone on his face, blinding him, but he didn't step back. Inside, Elena was still behind the wall, trembling, but not from fear. This was the shiver of being ready for what was coming. One hand slipped inside her jacket, the other reached for the pliers by the stove. The repair shop was no longer a shelter, it had become a fortress. Outside, one of the men approached Lucas. Look, he said. It's late. There's no electricity, no communication. The woman's in there. And who the hell are you to protect her? Lucas squinted. Who am I? He said in a low voice. I'm someone none of you could ever be. A man with a conscience. Just then, a noise came from inside. A window shattered. Elena pushed through the back window of the repair shop and started running toward a distant point. The men outside hesitated for a moment. There, over there, one of them shouted as he drew his weapon. Lucas lunged forward, pushing the man's hand up in one swift motion. The gunshot cut through the dark, the sound mixing with the chaos. The storm had started. Elena stumbled through the snow, trying to leave no trace. Lucas distracted two of the men while the third headed around the back. At that moment, Elena's foot slipped, and she fell. Snow was falling from the sky, but there was chaos on the ground. As the third man approached her, Elena closed her eyes, bracing for the end. But the end didn't come. A shadow appeared behind her. Lucas, without thinking, he threw the man to the ground with all his strength. Something broke. Maybe it was the wall inside Lucas, the wall of silence he had built over the years, the distance he had kept, the moment when the tired man within him broke. He helped Elena to her feet. We have to go, he said. Now? If not now, never. The two of them made their way down the back streets. Far outside the city, there was an abandoned station that Lucas knew well. When they arrived, they both sank to their knees. Their breaths rose in the air like mist. Elena pulled the USB from her pocket. I need to get this to the media. The game is over. Lucas took her hand. No, he said. This is just the beginning. The next day, the world woke up to a different kind of news. Billion-dollar empire collapsing, a witness's file leaked. But in the article, there was no mention of Lucas, nor of the events that had taken place that night. Because some heroes don't stand in the light. Some simply change everything in one night.